Okay, I see a lot of you guys have already been flipping through the book. What do you guys think? The book, actually, it was recently featured in USA Today and AOL's Holiday Gift Guide, which is really cool. Victor, I'm going to start with you. All right, you've been with the company for many, many years. In your introduction in the book, you talk about all the great Archie artists you got to know and work with. Can you give us a brief overview of what it was like at Archie all those years ago and how the company's changed since then?
Well, it was great working with all of those artists. I mean, you learned a lot from them. In fact, a lot of what they would do is they would train the younger artists as they came into the company. And actually, when I came into the company, I was replacing one artist by the name of Dexter Taylor, who went to was going to be drawing Little Archie along with Bob Bowling, and so I stepped into his spot in the art department, and that's where you got to meet all of these great artists like Harry Lucy, Bill Vigoda. They would come up. They all worked at home. All the freelance artists worked at home for the most part. They would come up maybe once a week. Those that lived a little further would come up for the Christmas party once a year. But otherwise, they would mail their work in. And they were all very dependable artists. I'm telling you this.
And?
What's he trying to say? Times have changed.
Yeah, well, to tell you how dependable they were, Harry Lucy had to deliver a job on a Friday, and on his way to the office, we were down on Church Street, not far from here. Well, it's not that far from here. And he was hit by a car. He got up and he came up to the office, and we said, "What took you so long?" He said, "I was hit by a car." I said, "Why didn't you go to the hospital?" He said, No, I'm okay. Do you have any white paint?" And he had gotten some blood on the artwork.
Oh, I want that original artwork. It's got his DNA on it.
Yes. And he sat down and he fixed it. And I mean, that's the kind of mentality, you know. And then we had...
Yeah, you guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're bleeding on our work.
When were you ever hit by a car?
I'll try.
Yeah, but working with them was really great. And Bill Vigoda, who was the brother of Abe Vigoda, yeah, he was his brother, and at that time, his brother was just doing commercials for American Motors cars. But Bill Vigoda was a tremendous artist. He actually wanted to be a fine artist. He could have been a fine artist. He used to do a lot of painting, a lot of sculpting, and but he drew comics. He had a wife and 2 kids, and that was a better way of earning a living. And sometimes he'd work up at the office through the night. He used to smoke a pipe, listen to opera, and just knock out pages. We used to, when we were really busy over the summer months, I'd have to get a book a day out of the office to go to the printer. So it was a lot of work, and all the other artists too. They're not all mentioned in the book, but most of the ones are. Dan DiCarlo started to, who is we considered him our premier artist. He even helped Dan out when he first came to work at Archie. Gave him some tips and said, "Don't work here," right? No, Dan set a whole new level for artwork with Archie, and in particular with the girls. He's known mainly for the Betty and Veronica book. And then there was Sam Schwartz, who was a real funny guy. He was so funny that the writers wanted to kill him. But every time he would get a story, he used to complain about the story. He would change the story. You wouldn't know what the story was to begin with. And but he was known for Jughead. He did mostly Jughead. But there are some stories that Sam Schwartz drew of Betty and Veronica that are in this book. I think of some covers too, maybe. Is that possible? I don't remember.
You guys want covers by him in there? They're in there.
We'll put them in before you leave. Yeah, so, and I just learned a lot, working with it. It was really great. It was it was different working there now. There were no computers. Everything was done by hand. Everything. And now all the coloring is done mostly digitally. Even the lettering can be done. Is done. And some artists work on the computers. They don't even write. Don't they draw it right on the tablet or something? Yeah. They don't even send their artwork in. They just email
Just
it.
bill. They just
send their bills
They just
in.
email
Right.
you a bill. That's how streamlined
Yeah,
it is.
so that's a note on the artist.
Craig, I'm going to kick it to you. If you guys don't know Craig Yoe here, he's a Eisner Award-winning comics historian, archivist, which that's basically the Oscars of comics. Craig, you've done a couple other books on the history of Archie. What was it like working with an Archie veteran like Victor on this project?
I mean, I found it like such a thrill, such a great privilege, and because I'm kind of a, I'm making a living doing this comics historian thing, but I'm first and foremost always a fanboy. So to meet and not only meet but work with a legend like Victor, who's been, you guys said, a long time, 54 years at Archie. He's still on probation, I guess, but I think it's working out, right? And so it was just an immense thrill. And by the way, we were all honored to be introduced, but in case one of us forgets, I want to say there's a luminary that made this book happen, that has revitalized the Archie Company, and that's John Goldwater, who's in the back row there. John? And yes, his wife does look like Betty, yes. So, because of John and Victor being given the privilege to work on their first art book, it was just nothing but sheer excitement. And because since I was a kid getting into comics, I've always loved the Archie characters, and I Walt Disney said he loved Mickey Mouse more than he loved any woman, but I don't know why he settled for Mickey Mouse when you could have Betty and Veronica, So it was a great thrill for me to work on this book. I'm very proud of it. I have done a lot of books, but I think this is the prettiest book I've ever worked on. It kind of has, even though it's about comics and cartoons, it has an elegancy, and I'm very proud with Victor and everybody's help the way it turned out. And thank you, John, for the privilege.
So I don't know if any of you guys follow Newsarama. They just ran an interview today with Victor talking about the book. And just to paraphrase you, Victor, you said when new artists came in, the older artists would set the standard for them to work toward and improve upon. So my question for Dan and Fernando is, which artists were you influenced by and are currently trying to improve upon?
It's working. Yeah, well, it's Dan DeCarlo for me all the way. When I started at Archie like 25 years ago, Dan was my idol. Dan was the guy in art school whose style that I followed, and when I was there for a few years, I was fortunate enough to be able to work closely with Dan, and he would lay out stories, and I would finish his stories for him. And I think I learned more from doing that than I did in all of my years at art school. Not to knock art school, but working with Dan directly was a real great learning experience. And since I was 5 years old, I was in love with Betty and Veronica and Dan's artwork, and it was such a thrill to work with him, and it's just a thrill to be included in a book like this. So it's been really great.
Yeah, for me, Dan DeCarlo as well. When I first started working at Archie, well, to this day, a few of us freelancers still come into the office regularly. I go in every week, and that was a great opportunity because Victor would ask Dan to sit down with us and go over our pages and really show us very hands-on, like, what we were doing wrong, what we were doing right, and how we could improve. So that was really just a great experience. And then I also I draw quite a bit of Jughead. So for me, I was a big fan of Sam Schwartz, who was really the man when it came to Jughead. I really loved his work. And one other guy, Victor mentioned him earlier, Harry Lucy, because he really had a very animated, I mean, he almost drew them like very real people, and they moved and with great poses while still keeping them funny and cute. So those are probably the big three for me.
Well, I'm going to open up for the whole panel on this one. Can you gentlemen please tell us all how you got involved with Archie to begin with?
Well, I kind of told you that. I was right out of art school, and they were looking for somebody up at Archie Comics, and as I said before, one of the artists was going freelance. They needed someone in the art department, so I, along with my whole cartooning class, or whoever was interested in the job, came up, and I was fortunate enough to be hired. And my first job was taking cleavages out of Katie Keene. That was, we had the code authority for many years, and the code authority was pretty strict, so you had to watch what you drew.
Did you keep that cleavage in a drawer and that?
I saved them. I still have them.
I saw a comic the other day that
I have them.
drew, and there was a little bit of cleavage in it. So like now you're
how many did I give
out of
you?
the drawer, putting it back
God.
in.
I gave them a lot.
I've got a lot of whiteouts.
Yeah, so, and that's basically how I got started, and just doing corrections, working on the books, and putting them together, and that was it. How'd you get started? Who hired you anyway?
I think this guy right here hired me. I was at the Joe
Who do
Kubert
you owe
School.
your success to?
This guy right here. I definitely do. I was at the Joe Kubert School, and you know, like everybody else, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was always, of course, a huge Archie fan. Had Archie stuff in my portfolio, and fortunately, Victor came to the school looking for artists and saw my stuff. Somehow he liked it. I don't know how, but he did. And I started doing single pages, like single page gags and things like that. And then, upon graduation of the Kubert School, there was a vacancy in the art department. So I started working in the art department, doing what everybody else does: corrections, production work, and then I got into the licensing stuff for a little bit after that. And I learned a lot of. This is right before computers kicked in, so I was doing a lot of mechanicals and learned how to do a lot of production that way, the old-fashioned way. And from then on, I worked in the office. I was up in the production for 10 years, and then I went freelance. So, been steadily employed for 25 years, so I can't complain. Yeah. Job security.
It was a similar thing for me. I attended the Joe Kubert School in Dover as well. And Victor's on the advisory board of the school. He tells the school what they need to be doing and teaching in order to stay up to date, and so that the school teaches the skills young artists need to get into the business, and the skills the companies are looking for when they hire. So on one of his visits to the school, I was in my last year, my final year at the school, a week before I graduated, and Victor very generously liked what I was doing, so he asked me to come to the office as soon as I graduated. So a week after I graduated, I started on my very first Archie story. And my first started in the digest, drawing the digest stories, and for me it's been 18 years. So they like to keep us around, I guess, when they like us.
And now Fernando teaches at the school.
Yeah. A year after I graduated, I returned to the school, and now I'm teaching there. So.
What do you teach there anyway?
The basic drawing and narrative art.
The way I got involved is the Archie offices aren't really too far from my own home, so I went over there and I knocked on the door and I introduced myself. I said, I'm a comics historian, a writer, designer. I'd like to, to help produce some books. And then I kind of quipped, don't make me beg. And they looked at me and they said, Victor, this is in John's office, Victor and John were both there. They said, get on the floor and grovel. You've got to beg. And I go, I'm not going to, oh wait, will I get my name on the cover? And they go, yes, slave. And I said, okay, so now my name's on the cover. So that's, talent is one way, but begging works too.
So after 70 plus years, we've pretty much seen Betty and Veronica in every imaginable situation. But is there anything you guys would want to do, just any crazy idea that hasn't been done yet? Short of Veronica turning into a vampire and Betty trying to slay her.
We've done that already.
Which
She
we've
turned
done.
into a vampire Veronica. I saw it, I bought it. I hate when people say, I saw that at the newsstand or the bookstore. It's better when you say, I bought it, right?
I like that.
Yeah, I bought that at the Stop and Shop last week. Veronica, Vampironica.
Veronica, yeah.
It's awesome. And there was
John's in the back,
and there
you
was
can
a little
pitch it
bit,
to him
there was
right
a little
now.
bit of Vampironica cleavage.
There was as much as I could get away with.
Yeah. Why don't you guys have them get married? Or why don't you introduce a...
that.
Oh, you did that. Why don't you introduce a gay character?
We did that too.
They've done a lot. They are, what is incredible is they are doing innovative things that the other companies, the wannabes, are following. That, that they introduced this gay character, they had him get married, and they're always on the cutting edge. They're always, right there with what kids are into, and they do it in a fresh, fun way, and they do kind of retro, crazy, neat things like Archie characters meet Kiss, and then they do, very cutting-edge social commentary, but in a fun way. It's all humorous and for good times, but I think it passes on great lessons to kids, and they're fearless as far as getting out there and refreshing the characters and doing new exciting things, and that's what's keeping Archie fresh. That's what's making it last all these decades, and and it was languishing a little bit before John came along, and everybody got excited, and there was new life into the company and the characters, and it's just and I'm saying this as an outside observer, just to see the excitement of the staff there, and to see the artists having a good time, and seeing the fans responding in such a big way. It's just really cool. I'm a big Archie fan. See, I told you, I'm a big fan.
So as you guys have seen who've been flipping through the book goes through each decade, just kind of showing off the styles of Betty and Veronica throughout. Did you guys have a favorite decade for art throughout all those decades?
I think mine was the 70s. I don't know. I think it's because when I was a little kid in the 70s, so I've got, I'm very inspired by the kid comics that I picked up when I was a kid. But I think, in my opinion, that was I think when Dan's art was at its peak, when the styles were there. I don't know. That's just my opinion. So some people have the 50s and 60s, but I think for me it was the 70s.
I was a 50s and 60s guy. Yeah, I like that. I think the stories too at that time were pretty sharp too. So I dig those stories.
Yeah, I was a 50s. I like the 50s. And you read some of the 40s stuff, and it's hysterical.
Yeah.
Funny stuff.
Really?
We have to put a disclaimer on the books if you when you reprint any of the 40s. But it's a really funny story. But the artwork wasn't as good, and you can see from this book how the artwork changes with each decade, and the artists got better with as they kept drawing. When they started working at Archie, they were teenagers, or then some of them went off to the Army, to war. Sam was in the Army Air Force.
Wow.
Florida, as a drill sergeant.
There's a very important and great artist, I think, from the 40s that, I don't know, doesn't get mentioned enough, I don't think, but John's dad dreamed up the idea of the characters, but the guy who visualized it was Bob Montana, and he his stuff started off kind of primitive, but he quickly became incredible. And even Dan DeCarlo told me that, you know, he greatly admired him and took a lot from him. And we reproduced some of his covers in this book, and I think they're as good as any of the other greats, living and passed on. Bob Montana was brilliant. Now another reason he kind of gets overlooked is because these guys are so involved in the comic books, and Bob quickly, soon after, you know, helping get the whole thing started, went off to do the Archie Comic strip, which is a very demanding full-time kind of job, so he wasn't too involved in the comic books, but he was a brilliant artist that I think needs to get more attention to, though. I mean, I'm right up there with my admiration for Dan DeCarlo and Harry Lucy. I think in working on this and other projects with the Archie Company, I've really become a Harry Lucy fan as I dug into their archives, because he was really great as far as body language and action and humor and, you know, physical comedy that he put the characters through, and expressions and stuff. He was really great. I love Lucy.
So I think it was mentioned earlier that this is Archie's first in-house art book, but it's not the last. Victor, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's coming up?
Well, the next book that Craig and I are working on is going to be a cover book. It's going to be covers, 70 years worth of covers. And then, which we're a little late in starting, I don't want to say this in front of the boss, but it's our 75th anniversary book that we have to get started on as well. So those are two things that are on the agenda. And, you know, it's been great working with Craig, you know, on this. And like he said, it's thanks to John that we were able to, you know, accomplish something like this and continue with even more books like that. And that's what we have so far.
Fair enough. So between all you guys, you've been really successful in your careers, and I get the feeling that we might have some aspiring comic artists and writers among us, so any sage advice you can give them?
Yeah.
I would just say, just draw, and get all the bad drawings out of you until the good ones start coming out. Just keep doing it. And Fernando's a teacher, so he probably has some good advice.
Practice is a big part of it, but also drawing everything, not just those things that you like to draw, whether it's giant robots or mutant monsters. Draw especially the real world. The more realistic stuff you draw, the more it'll help all of your drawing, everything that you want to draw. So draw people, cars, buildings, draw everything, and all of your drawing will improve that way. And if you especially want to draw for Archie, draw the Archie characters. Learn how to draw those guys, because likenesses especially is very important. They got to look like who they are.
When I was going to art school, we used to, on the subway going to school, used to take out a sketchbook and draw. Now they take out cameras. but and don't draw too near the edge of the platform. You have a question?
Hold on.
Hi, how you doing? Emerson Overton, nice to meet you. I was a fan of Archie since I was a kid. I remember the comic books in the 80s and 90s. The question I had was, are you guys ever going to like relaunch the animated series that I remember in a new way?
Can I talk about that? Yes, that's in the works. There will be an Archie animated series.
Wow, cool. Yay.
Brand new.
You heard it here first.
And if you didn't know, we're also doing a Sabrina the Teenage Witch animated series that's coming out on the Hub. So look for that this summer. And there's going to be a Sabrina movie that's in the works, a live action one, so watch out for that.
Nice.
So, let's just get straight to it. The age-old question, you guys, Betty or Veronica?
I'm Betty.
You're
I
Betty.
have to be.
Veronica.
Veronica.
I don't think there's any question. It's Veronica. I think it's like a nonsense question. Like, what's the deal? It's Veronica. She's hot. She's got that, dark hair, and she's rich, and she's even a little more shapely. Or Dan DiCarlo used to tell me that he because in an early issue of Harvey Kurtzman's Mad magazine, he did a satire about Archie called Starchy, and he made a jokey reference that they look exactly the same except for their hair color, but that wasn't how Dan drew them. He drew Veronica with a little more curve and a little more bosomy and a little more hips, and she's the hottest. This is crazy.
Let's take a vote. Audience, who's a Betty?
After all I just said?
How about our Veronica fans?
All right.
Okay, it's about a 50-50 split.
I mean,
It wasn't 50.
you even have dark hair. What's with this blonde kind? You. Sweet. Who wants sweet?
This might sound about like an oddball question, but another one for the audience. We got any Glee fans out there? Couple. One of the next big projects we're doing is Archie Meets Glee, if I might get that in there. And Dan is doing the artwork on it. And Dan previously did our crossover Archie Meets Kiss, which was really cool. And you want to tell us a little bit about Archie Glee?
Yeah, it's probably the hardest project I've ever worked on because there's 9,000 characters in the Glee TV show.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of approval process to go through and stuff, but the writer Roberto, who writes on the show too, is writing the story. So it's really fun because it's like the Archie world versus meets the Glee world. So you see like some of the Glee characters going out with the Archie characters, and it's like a whole nice little mix up of the characters. So it's a lot of fun. It's gonna be a really it's probably the most fun project I've worked on. So you'll really like it.
Cool. And Fernando, you've been working on Life with Archie. If you guys don't know, Life with Archie is our series where we get to see what would happen if Archie... Thank you.
Thank you.
Or thank Fernando. He's working on the Archie marries Veronica storyline. And then there's a dual
That's why
alternate reality where Archie marries Betty. So, you get to actually see what would happen if in both paths. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing on that, Fernando.
That's a really fun series because it's Archie. He's a little bit older. He's an adult and he's married to Veronica, and it's a bit of a soap opera. And I love getting the scripts because I'm always curious to see what happens next myself. Even though I'm drawing it, but I still want to know what happens in the next issue. So I like it. It's fun to draw, but it's also just fun for me as still an Archie fan to read. So it's a really, and anything can happen. I mean, we get serious. We have Kevin Keller, character Dan created, first gay character. He's running for the Senate in the current storyline.
No kidding.
He got married. First gay marriage in comics. His husband has been shot in the comics as well. So things get real in Life with Archie. It's really a crazy, exciting book. It's a real roller coaster.
Cheryl gets cancer.
That's right.
It's not as depressing as it sounds.
There are some laughs in the book, believe it or not.
Great. So we've got a wealth of Archie knowledge here tonight, so I hope you guys came prepared with questions. Let's open up the floor. Yes, you in the scarf.
Hey. In the past, you guys have followed the trends or social, stories have social commentary. I was psyched to see there's one Betty and Veronica story that kind of makes a little fun of women's lib. Just like right now, I think there was I didn't read it yet, but I saw that there was a Occupy Riverdale, and you guys follow the trends. Are you ever worried about alienating readers or offending anybody, or you guys are just bringing in real stuff? You only see it as freshening or invigorating your characters?
Well, we try and do those things in a kind of with a light touch, so to speak. We're not going to get.
I wasn't psyched because if I would answer, I was just psyched that
Well, you have to keep up with the times, you know, and it's Archie's and his friends, you know, they're reacting to what's going on around them, you know, and I think one of the stories had to do with the girls maybe wanting to get onto the baseball team. I know we had a story like that, and that's sort of like a women's lib type of a storyline, you know, where boys didn't want her on, but she wound up on the team anyway. So they all have happy endings.
These are, I mean, you know, bringing up women's liberation and all. I mean, these are very strong, some of the best strong female characters in comics. I mean, you know, Veronica does help her dad run the business.
In Life with Archie.
Betty's really into sports, and it can, if Archie's jalopy breaks down, the first one he goes to is Betty. She's a mechanic, and these are no like, I mean, they're what I think is the result of you know, good social change that's been going on in the last few decades. They're both sexy, yet they're strong and smart, all together all at once, and that I think that's part of the appeal of Betty and Veronica. They are great role models. They're kind of a yin and yang kind of thing, and there's you know, two different kind of psyches, two different parts to them, but together they're like great role models for young girls. I think that's why so many young girls love to read their adventures and kind of aspire to be like them, because they're good looking, they're popular, they've got friends, and they're smart and they're strong all together.
Not Betty's diary where she's just pining away. It's not really, you know, historically, I think they were both. And if you guys are creating compilations of like Betty and Veronica from the 60s to the 70s, you're specifically choosing, you know, the ones that appeal to current audiences, I guess. But I still think it's nice that you guys aren't showing these times or topics.
Yeah, it was fun to do the book by decades, because you know, the characters did reflect the different decades. We have an amazing 1940s strip there by a guy who really specialized in superhero comics, but he was I guess moonlighting for Archie at the time, and Irv Novick, and he did these great kind of Betty and Veronica were like in 1940s bathing suits. They look like kind of Betty Grable-ish, and they're kind of have a realistic tinge to the artwork, and you know, they look like Rosie the Riveter or Betty Grable or something. You know, like they were really cool. And in every different era, you know, we did reprint that story where Veronica's very much into women's liberation, and we reprinted a 1970s story because the artwork was great, the story was funny, and it was a very something that really reflected what was going on at the time in our culture. So it was really fun to do it by decades. I actually resisted it at first because there's been some projects where they kind of examine the different decades that the Archie characters were in, and I thought like, oh gee, let's not do that again. But it turned out it was really a great, Victor really pushed for that, and I'm glad you know, he did, because it did turn out to be a great way to kind of showcase the whole history, and to touch on all the different things that they've gotten into over the years, and you know, you can see our own lives in there, or our parents, or even maybe some of you, your grandparents. You know, you can kind of see this whole kind of history unfold in the book, right up into the present time, where we have you know, the Archie characters getting tattoos and things like that, and a great story that Dan did here at the end, and then Fernando draws, like the 1940s, he draws these sexy girls, Betty and Veronica, in bathing suits. You know, like if you're worried about sexist kind of guys, Victor, me, and Dan, we're very liberated, but Fernando's the guy to go after.
Somebody has to do it.
Yes, sir, in the glasses.
Thank you very much. I love Betty and Veronica, I love Archie Comics, but I also love pop culture of the time as well. And this is a question for Craig. When I see especially the 40s and 50s Betty and Veronica, they really remind me of Varga and Petty and all those great pinup artists, you know. And I can't help wondering if you went through them, through like all the great calendars of Petty and Veronica, of Petty and Varga and Earl Moran, all those people, whether you would see images back and forth that one of those artists, either at Archie or at Esquire, were copying the same sort of figures.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, in the old days, I mean, artists didn't have Google Image, so that, you know, they would collect calendars and subscribe to Esquire magazine, and you know, and they created what were called swipe files and morgues, and it was just like they would tear out magazine pages and file them so they could know how to draw a toaster, like to speak to Fernando, what's Fernando saying, or a great pinup pose. If the girls were going to the beach, they would take a Varga pose or something. It's you know, it was a time-honored tradition, and artists, like you said, used to swipe from each other. I know Alex Raymond, the guy who drew Flash Gordon, he once said, like, apologized to Hal Foster, the guy who drew Prince Valiant. He said, gee, I don't know if you know, looked at my strip in last Sunday's paper, but I swiped this horse that you drew, and Hal Foster looked at him for a second, and Alex was sweating it out, and Hal said, no, you're wrong. I swiped that horse originally from you. So that, yeah, artists were always, you know, using reference like that, and hopefully making it their own.
The other thing, I don't want to take too much time, but what I like about the earlier issue, the 40s specifically, is that there was really no set style. And there were like almost 5 different styles of Archie artists who were working and doing Betty and Veronica. I mean, the Irv Novick story, that is bizarre.
Yeah, it's
That's one of the most
right?
twisted things I've ever seen in an Archie comic. And the last question I have, and this is for Victor. I think that in the Dan DeCarlo era, I think that he was probably, for all the Betty and Veronica strips I've seen that he did, he must have been thinking, oh, I wonder if the Comics Authority will miss this. Because he keeps pushing the envelope and doing pretty outrageous things that sort of slipped through. I mean, the famous Betty the Hooker cover of Betty and Veronica, I couldn't believe that got through. But he sort of...
I missed that one.
Oh, no, it's a great one. I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's a Betty and Veronica cover, and it's a minor thing, but there's Veronica in the left hand, and then there's Betty in the right. And Betty is sort of in pigtails. It's actually a pinup pose from the book. And she's in pigtails and a bikini, and she's standing like she's on a street corner. And the caption is, "Looking for some fun? Come pick us up. You won't be sorry." And so, like, how did this get through? And what I wanted to ask Victor is, are there any strips
I wasn't there at that time.
No, were there any strips
I was off that day.
This guy has a dirty mind. Yes.
Were there any strips that got through and you said, oh God, this can't go through. We can't let this story through?
Lots of times.
Like what?
Don't tell him.
Well, with Harry Lucy, he had a way of drawing things. It sort of had double meanings. You know, he'd have a big splash panel of a girl eating a hot dog. She hadn't taken a bite out of it yet.
I don't get it.
But you had to see it, and we wouldn't. I wouldn't let that go through. I took the bite out. And, you know, and when he used to send his work in, he used to send the work in lots of times without any clothes on the girls. No, they weren't. They were in pencil. He put the clothes on one panel, and then the inker would finish it up the rest.
Yes, the gentleman in the hat. You've been waiting patiently. Yes, you.
I was looking for the mic. Hi, my name's Jordan. I was wondering if the artist could talk more about getting into the business, or how other artists got into the business. You guys seem to be, you got picked up right out of art school, or just in general about that. Thank you.
Well, nowadays one of the biggest things you really have to do is meet people like us, like Victor, meet the editors, go to conventions, and really get used to showing your artwork. Just keep drawing and show your artwork to people, listen to what they say, listen to their reactions, and take in all the advice and just keep going that way. If you can, get a business card, get an email, and stay in touch with them, and just keep sending them your work as you go through. And that seems to be the way most people do it nowadays. At the school where I teach, we always have that time, like the way I got hired, where the different companies come to the school and they review the students' portfolios. We always recommend to the students, make contacts, make a good first impression, and then keep following up. Keep that relationship going.
Yeah, and it's a lot less expensive to get into the industry now because you can just set up a website or set up a link to your samples. When I started out, you had to go to, you carried your portfolio around with you and showed your work, and you come into the city and you leave your portfolio off, and at the end of the day, you'd pick it up, and if they didn't like your stuff, well, you wasted a day, an expensive day in the city. Nowadays, everything's done by, a link on your computer. So the digital age that's one way it's really improved things getting into the industry. But it's still, it still goes by the old-fashioned rule that you have to have talent, you have to be able to draw, and it's about connections, and that part stays the same. So.
I mean, the short answer is if you want to make comics, just make comics. I guess that's the simplest thing you can do. I mean, Axe Cop, I don't know if you guys have heard, is what started out as a digital comic, and now it's getting made into an animated show, so digital comics are definitely a good way to go. Yes, ma'am in the hat.
I was wondering two things. What does the S on Jughead's sweater stand for?
We get that question every time.
And what's his little sister Jellybean's real name? Those things have really puzzled me.
Well, her real name is Forsythia.
What? Cynthia?
Jughead's real name is Forsyth,
Oh, yeah.
and her name is Forsythia. And the S on Jughead's shirt, no one knows. Only Bob Montana. But write him a letter.
But this guy thinks it's something dirty.
A lot of people do, but it's not. Rumor has it that it was the first letter of a Sandlot baseball team that Bob Montana used to play on when he was a kid. But I don't think so. I don't think that's true. I think it's a dirty word. So.
Yes, next question.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
My question is, as you were speaking, it seems that most of the artists you're talking about have been male over the years, and I'm just wondering if that was a conscious decision or if there have been female artists that we just don't know about, and are they outlined in the book? And if not, why?
I don't think there are any female artists listed in this book, but we do have quite a few that work for us. It's Kathleen Webb, who writes for us. She hasn't written anything lately, but she does write for us. Tanya Del Rio, who worked on Sabrina, and she's working on another book right now. It's going to be a different type of a book, not a comic. And she's done quite a bit of work for us. When I first started working at Archie, Giselle, yeah, that's right, Giselle. What's her last name? Lagasse, yeah. Giselle Lagasse. She's working on a book now too, in one of the Archie books. And when I first came to work at Archie, there was a woman and her husband who worked on our books. They didn't do any penciling, any drawing. They did inking and lettering. So there's always been some, and another woman who used to handle our Archie clubs for us back in the day. But right now, I would say we have about a half a dozen women writing or drawing for us.
And you have women editors there.
Yes, that's true.
Giselle actually did that Occupy issue that somebody mentioned earlier. And I don't know if you guys caught this, she did the Reversedale issue where the characters gender swap. If you haven't seen that, it's hilarious. You got to check that out. Yes, ma'am, in the back over there.
I was just wondering if there's ever any crossover between artists and writers, and if any of you have ever been involved in writing the comics, or if only drawing.
Well, I write and draw a lot of my own stuff. And Fernando's he's rewritten quite a bit of stuff too. And it's like with the Kevin Keller stuff, I pretty much write all of that as I created the character. But like stuff like Archie Meets Kiss, someone else will write that, and like Archie Meets Glee, Roberto, who writes the show, is writing that. So it kind of works both ways. Sometimes we do both. Sometimes one person does the other. So it's always fun to it's fun to do your own stuff, but it's always fun to take someone else's script and work on that too.
I mean, we have writers who can't draw, and we have artists who don't write. So.
And then you have some that do both.
And then I have some that do both, like Dan. And Fernando, he writes and draws too. Can. Yeah.
Yes, over here.
This is that Betty lover.
How do you guys decide how you're going to dress the characters and what outfits they're going to wear?
Well, lots of Google Images helps a lot. Teen Vogue, 17, a lot of the teen magazines. So we get it looks strange when I get a lot of these like teeny bopper fashion magazines addressed to Dan Parent coming to my house, but they're for work only. And you just have to keep an eye on fashion, and it changes a lot. So but
Well, Dan DeCarlo used to go to high schools early in the morning, and as the girls were getting out of their parents' car and walking into high school, he'd be taking pictures of them. And
that's true.
Until he got arrested. No, but that was how he kind of kept up on it.
A big thing too is to dress the girls according to their personality. Like, Veronica wears fancy clothes. For Veronica, I always just look at what Kim Kardashian is wearing. She's my real life Veronica. And then Betty wears Betty's a lot more versatile because she could dress kind of tomboyish, but she'll also look beautiful and sexy and elegant as well, but not as elegant as Veronica. So I keep in mind the characters too.
Do we have time for one more? Yes.
That's 2 questions.
I have one last question. With many careers, people choose to say leave while the career is on top, and my personal opinion is to keep evolving until there's no more evolvement, or until the fans completely drop off. And I wanted to know, how long are you planning to take the Archie comics and series into the future?
I'm riding this train until it crashes, so I'm on it forever. No, but it's talking about evolving. I've been at Archie for 25 years, but it's really been the last 5 or 6 years that I feel that there's been a real evolution. So I'm more excited than ever with the things that we're doing now. So thanks to John coming on with Kevin Keller, Archie Meets Kiss, all these great projects we've been doing, we've really evolved in the last few years. So.
Yeah, it's really now is a new beginning, and anytime you're working, you feel like, I hope to get better and better and better. So at the time, you think you're doing your best possible. So I keep going till they tell me to stop. But this is a good time right now, and it looks pretty promising for the future. Because, like Dan said, we're doing all these great new stories that we couldn't have done before, and it's. Archie's meeting Glee, Archie's meeting Kiss. That wouldn't have happened, say, 10, 20 years ago. And certainly we wouldn't have had a gay character 10 or 20 years ago. So, and a book like Life with Archie would never have existed before. So it's really an exciting time, and I think with that much excitement, it's going to go on.
Anybody have a final word before we wrap up?
Thank you. Thank you guys
Thank you.
for being here.